Hello, welcome to our Chapter 7, Section 1 notes. And these notes begin in our textbook on page 180. Chapter 7 is about the judicial branch, the part of our government that interprets the laws, and Chapter 7, Section 1 is equal justice under the law. The main idea of Chapter 7, Section 1 is the rights of all U.S. citizens are protected by laws and the courts. Some key terms to know as we read through this chapter are crime, criminal law, civil law, common law, precedent, constitutional law, and appeal. And three things to keep in mind as we read this first section of chapter 7. First question is, in what ways is the United States a nation of laws? Second question, what are the four sources of law in the United States? And our third question is, what roles do the courts play in the United States? So our Chapter 7, Section 1 text begins with the idea that we, the United States, are a nation of laws, that every society needs rules. Without rules, people would feel like they could do anything they wanted. Traffic laws protect all of us. So all of us have to live with the laws that our legislative branch passes and our executive branch is enforcing. So in that way, we are a nation of laws, but then those laws are interpreted by the judicial branch. There are two main kinds of law. So legislatures, either state or federal legislatures, pass two main kinds of law: criminal law or civil law. And criminal law makes crime illegal. Criminal law basically refers to any law that defines what are crimes, and crimes are behaviors that are illegal because society through government says the behavior is harmful. Basically, if you commit a criminal act, if you break criminal law, you have committed a crime against society. And society is represented by the government. So if I rob a store, I have not committed a crime against that store. I have, but really the law I am charged with is committing a crime against society. Robbery is the crime. Now, I may, in my punishment, have to pay back the store or do something else to help the store itself. But the crime I've committed is against all of society because robbery, we have decided, is illegal. And so then I am prosecuted by the person who comes and tells me I did wrong, and they will charge me with a crime and prosecute me. That's the government. So it is not the store that has to come prosecute me, but the city of Collinsville or the state of Illinois or the federal government charges me with a crime in court. So that's a violation of criminal law. Civil law is a group of laws that refer to disputes between people. So if two people get divorced, for example, the government is not involved in that, but they can go to court to try to fight each other. It could be Smith versus divorced Smith over who gets the house, for example. Or if you sue someone because you tripped on their lawn and broke your leg, and you think they didn't shovel their walk. Anyway, that's not a crime against society the way robbery is or murder is. That is called civil law, and two people would sue each other. So you could have Smith versus Jones in court. So the text continues with sources of law. So where on earth is it that we actually get these laws that we can be charged with for breaking? So there are four main areas. There is statutory law. Statutory is a fancy word for statute, and statute is a fancy word for law. So it's almost like laws that are written down, laws that are passed by the legislature. So all that we have learned so far is Congress passes a law, the president enforces that law, the legislative branch, the executive branch. So any law passed through that process is simply called statutory law. So of course, if there's a law passed and on the books that robbery is illegal and you commit robbery, then you've broken statutory law and you can be charged with that offense. But there's another source of law called common law. And common law is a type of law that comes from judges' decisions. They rely on common sense and previous cases. And that notion of previous cases is also called precedent, which it discusses there on the next page. But so common law basically is all of the different decisions that different courts judges and juries have made over time. And if there are many, many cases decided the same way, then next time a judge hears a case in the future, that judge, she's supposed to look back at all those previous cases and say, well, all of these 10 cases that came before were very similar. I should probably rule in the same way. And so common law is the full weight of all previous cases in a similar way that come to rely on precedent or earlier decisions deciding such cases. And common law came from the British system. The people in England and Great Britain, the judges there used common law to help interpret statutory law and decide cases, and the United States continued that tradition. There are two other sources, administrative law and constitutional law. Administrative law means some parts of government, in effect, make laws that aren't the legislative branch. So we looked in our previous chapter on the executive branch about things like the Consumer Products Safety Commission that can create rules that have the effect of law governing, say, product safety. You can't make toys full of poison for kids to chew on. And that can have the effect of law. And so that's another source of our laws in this country. And then lastly, of course, we have constitutional law, the highest law in the land, any law that is based directly on the U.S. Constitution and on U.S. Supreme Court decisions interpreting that Constitution. So any of our amendments that we have looked at, for example, would be a source of constitutional law. It is sort of like statutory law at the highest level. So Congress didn't pass the Constitution, the framers did, and the states ratified it. And so that is our first source of most important law. Then we have everything that Congress has ever passed as statutory law. Then we have all of common law, the interpretation of all of those cases that have come before based on statutory and constitutional law. And then lastly, we have administrative law, regulatory bodies of the executive government helping make new rules that have the weight of law. So what is the role of courts in all of this? So Chapter 7 examines not just where laws come from, but then how courts deal with those laws. So really, courts use the four sources of law to settle disputes. And you should read all of Chapter 7, Section 1. But in effect, some people will disagree. Even when it is written down as statutory law, this is what robbery is. Someone might say, well, I didn't rob that store. I walked in and took the candy, but I left $1 on the counter and walked out. And the man behind the counter, pretended he didn't see that $1 and accused me of robbery, but I didn't really do it. And so anyway, you can have a dispute over the interpretation of the law and how that works. Maybe I threw the $1 up on the counter, but it fell down and landed on the floor in front of me, and the person behind me came and picked it up and walked away. And so I didn't really pay for that candy bar. Is that robbery or not? It gets complicated. Reality does. And so courts step in and actually interpret the law. They take the statutory law, they take what is written down as law, they then take the facts of the case. Did Schusky really steal that candy bar? Here's all the facts that occurred. And the court will come to a determination, to a judgment. I, in fact, did rob the store. No, I'm not guilty. I did not rob the store. And in that first decision of the court, I'm found guilty. I may very well say, I think the court screwed that up. I think the court got that decision wrong. And so I have the right to appeal, the process by which I can then ask a higher court to review the results of that trial. So both state and federal courts have 3 layers or 3 levels. We have district courts or trial courts, the first place where almost all of those cases begin. And then if you don't like the decision, you can appeal to the appellate court. You are not guaranteed to be heard by the appellate court, but you can. And then lastly, if I don't like the appellate court decision, I can appeal to the Supreme Court. And so that is the very beginning of our Chapter 7 notes on the judicial system.